Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 252nd Right and Left discussion forum. Our topic today is going to be a question: has the speed and availability of political information exceeded our ability to digest it? Today's discussion, begins with me filling in for Brian. He had a business dealing that he couldn't leave. Then Tom Finley, retired Vice President of Human Resources at Rubbermaid Incorporated, followed by Susan Hanlon, retired Dean of the College of Business at the University of Akron, and finally Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and the faculty of Wadsworth Senior High. So today's topic is should be kind of an interesting one, especially since we're this close to election time. The question is, does the speed and availability and variety of political information and opinion exceed the voters' ability to digest it and make informed decisions? In the past, opinions, ideas, and positions on the issues of the day took days, weeks, and sometimes months to have broad distribution. The average voter could take their time to think about where they stood on the candidate's views before they were bombarded with opposing ideas and opinions on how they could be impacted by their vote. Over time, with improvements in technology and the speed of communication, ideas and opinions could be shared almost instantly and countered just as fast. Add to that the sophistication and professional opinion shapers that have developed in recent years and the biased reporting that has become almost omnipresent. Are we at a point where making our voting decisions are based on something other than critical thought process? Are we choosing a candidate because of party, personality, good looks, race, religion, gender, or something other than our fact-based opinion that our choice is ready, willing, and able to govern in the best interest of our country? Tom, handle that.
Well, the answer is you left one thing out, I think, on that, John, and that is the communication that we live by is heavily biased. They're going to be successful businesses based upon the communication and the ways in which they make it happen. Hence, the competition among news agencies and the various ways we get our information is a very important. It affects decisions made by the owners of and distributors of the information we see and seek. An important factor.
Patty, what are your thoughts?
When I look at the amount of information, yes, it has increased to a great deal. And as a matter of fact, it's instantaneous. We hear about everything immediately. There are no secrets anymore. It used to be, for example, how many people did not know that FDR was basically confined to a wheelchair? And there was an agreement with photographers when he was president not to take pictures of him with his braces or being helped out of a car, this type of thing. That type of illusion is gone now. We don't put our politicians on pedestals and have agreements to ignore them. So there is a great deal more. Now, is it too much to digest? No, I really don't think so. I think the biggest problem, and you alluded to this when you mentioned the word bias, is that we tend to, as a populace, take in only that information that's on our side of the aisle. People may listen to only conservative talk shows, conservative podcasts, conservative cable stations, conservative or read conservative newspapers. On the other hand, there are those that only read the liberal side. They listen to the liberal podcast and the liberal cable TV stations, and they get their news from the New York Times as opposed from the New York Post. So what this does is, even though you're getting more information, it's still slanted because you're only listening to half of this. Case in point, the debate that was held Tuesday night. I watched the entire thing, as I do with all of the debates. I think it's important to do that. And when it was over, I had my opinions as far as, okay, I thought that Waltz started off sounded very nervous, was unsteady. I thought that Vance was doing a good job, although he was giving answers that were completely different to what he has said on the campaign trail. I thought that Waltz got stronger towards the end. I thought it was a civil discussion for the most part. And at the end, I felt it was kind of a 50-50 draw for me. Got some information from it. I then watched the analysis on both Fox and on MSNBC. And it was like night and day. I turned on Fox and it was, oh my gosh, Vance did the greatest thing in the world. And they showed all the parts where Vance did well. And he did do well on parts. So Vance won. Then I flipped over to MSNBC. Okay, Walt started off nervous, but boy, did he bring it home at the end. And without a doubt, Waltz won this election. So which station you listen to is going to determine what your opinion is of how that debate turned out. The interesting thing then is I then watched the next day where they had focus groups and they talked to people and said, what do you think about this debate? Who do you think won the debate? Who did better? And interestingly enough, most of those people didn't watch the debate, the entire debate, or didn't watch any of it. And then they gave their opinion based upon what they'd heard the analysis on their favorite station was. And I saw this on both sides of the aisle. So I guess what I'm trying to get across is that we're not getting too much information, is that we're trying to get our too much information from the same source. And we need to spread out what we listen to and what we read so that we get both sides of an issue and we can make informed decisions for ourselves, not based upon just what one talking head says over another.
So you're the one.
I'm the one what?
Has a broad view of candidates and questions and so forth.
I think I'm as biased as the next guy. I am definitely a liberal, and anyone who knows me well knows how I feel about that. But the thing is, though, you have to try and listen to both sides, or you really don't get a complete.
That's what I mean by you're the one. I don't know of anyone else who does that the way you do.
Oh, well.
So that's a compliment. Susan, what do you think?
So when I read the question, and I think at the end it says it ended with that, does it impair or, how does it impact decisions? And so I took that whole notion of speed, availability, and variety of information and kind of defined it as information overload. Because I think that's a, very common phrase that we hear, that we have information overload. And so I was like, well, so, what are the impacts of information overload? And I looked up a couple studies, and basically the effect of information overload is avoidance, confusion, and anxiety. And I think that we see all three of those in today's voters. So you have people who are just, I don't watch network television because I can't stand the ads. And I have to admit, we spent some time in New Jersey in September, And of course, Pennsylvania, is a swing state. Oh my gosh, the presidential campaign, the commercials were all day long. If and even on some of the cable channels. And so yeah, you get to the point you're like, well, let's watch a movie. I don't want to watch TV. So where I'm not gonna look at social media. So there is definitely people get to the point where they just shut down. And then I was also surprised with the issue of anxiety. How many things, if you Google, if you do a Google search of election information overload, you get all these websites about how to take care of yourself, like how to protect yourself against the anxiety of the election. And I thought, what a sad state of affairs, that you have to, that some people, and I have to say, I do know a few people that get so wound up about it, and they go down these rabbit holes, they spend all day online, and they get very upset and unhappy and anxious. And then confusion, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, and I think the one way you guard against confusion, Patty, I think sometimes people do this is they just listen to one side. They're like, I'm so confused. I can't stand it. I can't figure this out. I'm just going to pick a side and listen to them and be done with it. So, in the end, the answer to that question, do we get too much information? I sort of, one of my basic tenets is you can never have too much information. Now, it's getting more and more difficult to parse out the good information, and there is so much, so many different medias. And I read a thing about the like, for instance, the debates, and there was the Kennedy-Nixon debate. And then even this one, I heard people talking about the vice presidential one, how different your thoughts are if you listen to it on the radio or if you watched it on television. Yeah. Like people that listen, that Nixon Kennedy one, there were studies that showed that people who listened to it thought Nixon did better. Right. People who watched it thought Kennedy did better. And they're doing that same thing with this one. JD Vance is a good looking guy, right? And he's young and he looked good. He performed well. And Walt's not so much. I mean, he's just an average looking older guy. And so I could see now I watched the whole thing. I thought my takeaway from that one was, and I like the way it's been characterized, is it was Midwest nice. They were civil. They said that they used the terms "I don't disagree" or "I agree" over a dozen times. So it was much easier to watch and listen to than the presidential ones have been. And so information overload, it has some definite negative impacts. I think it can lead people to say, well, I made up my mind, I'm not listening anymore. And I'm just done with it. Or, I'll just, and then another thing I read in terms of influence on voters, actually other people have the most influence on you other than any of the media. So.
One of the things that occurred to me in the vice presidential debate was, no matter how hard they tried, the moderators could not stay neutral. No. I've challenged myself on that too. Can I possibly stay neutral? Right. No, I don't think I can. I've got a certain set of beliefs that are kind of ingrown and just won't go away. I know that on the debate, I can't remember which one of the moderators, no matter how hard she tried, she could not accept a comment that was made by, excuse me, the Republican candidate. They had an agreement not to do fact checking. But he said something that was not factual. and she couldn't help it. She just couldn't help it. And I think that's where most of us are. Patty, you're liberal, and you're going to stay liberal until the day you do something else. But and I'm the same way about being conservative. And when I think about my first election, presidential election, was the Kennedy-Nixon election. I was just dazzled by John Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it on television rather than listening to it on the radio. At the time, there were 3 television networks. All 3 of them did a great job of being neutral over a long period of time. They really did. But I couldn't help myself. I was just dazzled by the charisma and the charm and the good looks of John Kennedy. That was my 21-year-old brain working. I was just, I wish that I could have looked like John Kennedy and had his money too. But,
I think one of the problems is you're seeing in the debates, you're seeing more out and out lies. I mean, it's not, we're not talking about taking data and reading it in 2 different veins where no, we're just out and out bold-faced lies. And, and I have a different take. When you call out a moderator for, hey, I didn't think you were supposed to be fact-checking, you're basically saying, hey, you're supposed to let me lie, and if he doesn't catch me, I get away with it. So,
that's what I thought too.
So I'm not sure, that's a good thing. The one thing I was thinking of is that we talk about all of this information that we have and this big overload, but yet there are that percentage of people that have no idea who they're going to vote for president. Now, perhaps those are the people that are feeling the overload that they can't make up their mind. Now, I'm sure in everyone on this panel, in our minds, how could somebody not have made a decision by now? But perhaps these are the people that are most affected by it. They have listened to everything and they just don't know who to believe, so they decide they can't decide who to vote on.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say that what I try to remember is, and when I'm listening to, watching whichever media I have, they have a primary objective in presenting what they're doing, and that is to make a profit, or they're not in business. And so remember that, and who they put on and what they coach them on how and what to say, etc. So there's more involved here than just watching. We have we have a radio station or a TV station making a decision about the criteria that they're going to ask the presenters to make. What difference does that make? I don't know, but it does make a difference.
Susan, what were you going to say?
I was, one of my thoughts while I was thinking about this topic was, in terms of, impact on the voters, and then another side of this is the impact on people's willingness to be a candidate. The speed, you can't, like you said, FDR. That is beyond comprehension today, that people could have known that he could not have known that he was in a wheelchair. Because, how could that, Joe Biden takes one fall up the steps and in 5 minutes, everybody has seen it and known it. And so, this idea of so many news outlets, like you said, we used to have 3. That was basically it, a couple of newspapers. But, okay, a couple of newspapers. Wasn't it Hearst that owned all the newspapers? They determined what you saw. That's why people didn't know FDR was in a wheelchair. But I like today, you know that every little thing that you've done or you're gonna do is gonna hit the media. And I think that, then of course that has a big impact on a lot of things, but the way that we, it's a business. There's so many out there, so many people out there trying to get it first, make it sensational, get people to listen, that, I think that has an impact, on the whole election process.
Well, Susan, when you think back to the past, we had three TV networks.
Mm-hmm.
But I was born in 1939, so we got our first TV in 1952. And I was 11 years old. And the news on television was a great leap forward from what we heard on the radio. Now, I was a kid. I didn't bother listening to the radio to hear all the political news and all of that. But the fact is, the three networks that came along with Huntley Brinkley and Walter Cronkite, and I can't remember the third guy was on for a gas company, but the thing is that they, in my memory, did a great job of being neutral.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember Huntley and Brinkley and Walter Cronkite especially having a political point of view. They just broadcast the news.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, the current NBC, CBS, ABC, I don't think there's any doubt they lean liberal, but then you get the ones like Fox and MSNBC, where, I mean, they don't even apologize. I mean, that's basically like, if you're a conservative Republican and you want to hear all that all day, listen to Fox, because you're not going to hear, because it is crazy, Patty. I'm the same way. I listen to this stuff myself, and then you turn each network on for a little bit, and I'll be like, well, that is not at all what I thought. Or they pull these little sound bites out, but they are biased. But I think Fox and MSNBC are worse than the major networks. I mean, they're not nearly as, I think they're more like they used to be. They've tried to stay that way, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think it depends on your own biases.
Yeah.
I'm conservative, and I have been for a long time. Even though my first presidential election, I voted for John Kennedy. But the fact is that it's very, very hard to listen to a network that is opposing your own points of view. I try to do.
You think currently, like NBC, you think do you feel that when you watch that on a daily basis that they oppose your viewpoints?
Yes.
Do you? Because I'm conservative too. I mean, I label myself as economically conservative and socially liberal. All right, so I don't know what that makes me, but I feel what I will often hear myself saying to the TV is, "Oh, but why aren't you reporting this?" Because I know about something else. It's like, well, why aren't you reporting this side of it? But to just list, I mean, I think unless you're super one side or the other, I don't know. I think they still come across fairly neutral.
I think what you see sometimes is they provide both points of view.
Yeah, they do.
They will have people that have opinions. They're not totally neutral, but they provide an equal number of conservatives and an equal number of liberals.
Yeah.
And they discuss
I think that
things.
One of the best things that's ever happened to politics or our election procedures, if you will, is the fact that the networks are seeing that as a source of selling what they're selling. And of course, it's competition.
Yeah.
And that competition does keep it pretty clean, if you will. And we do and are better informed as citizens before we vote than ever before.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, in the morning when I'm having breakfast, I'm watching Fox. I can't remember the name of the program, but there's a panel of 4 people. Then they're discussing things back and forth. But about once or twice a week, one of the news people will go to a restaurant in some part of the country and interview all sorts of people. No, not all sorts. They go to Republican restaurants. They have to, because almost everybody they interview, they'll say, well, who are you going to vote for? Well, I'm Trump all the way. What is it about Trump you like? Oh, I think he's the man for the job. Oh, he's good. I just agree with him. I mean, so shallow.
Yeah.
I think that person has been bombarded with the same amount of information as everybody else, but they just shut off part of it, which is easy to do.
Yeah. I think another issue is the relevance of what we hear. You know, we hear, like, I mean, let's go back to FDR. Who cares if he was in a wheelchair? You know, it didn't impair his mental ability. It didn't keep him from doing anything he needed to do. So maybe, you know, it was better that people didn't know, because that's really not a relevant thing. But most people can't help but let that influence them. So, you know, you see things like, I mean, I can't even come up with one anymore, but they'll show or you know, even said, and people get all wound up about it, you know, and it's like, but is that really relevant? Yeah.
Ron DeSantis's boots. That's an example of if they pick on that one, Vance's pink tie. I saw people complaining about the fact that he had a pink tie on in the debate. And I thought, okay.
Yeah. Well, and you know, you talk about clothes and appearance. Female candidates get raked over.
Oh yeah.
That. You know, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. I sit there and I'm like, oh my gosh, why can't she wear, you know, blah, blah, blah. Why does she have a black blouse on with a navy blue blazer?
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
who cares?
very much, folks. Unfortunately, our time is up, and that we will move. Oh, by the way, please, if you have an idea of the topic, let me know.
Okay.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.